Chapter 11. Working at a grocery store is difficult. Brett quickly found out that operating a store, even a small one like WellsCo, was a lot of work. He was the first official employee of WellsCo, and the only co-worker being his boss and the owner of WellsCo, Preston Wells. Preston had arrived in St. Farr by way of Miss Melton. They were somehow related, but Preston never told Brett exactly how. Brett never asked directly to find out. Preston was a tall man in his early 30s who had never owned or operated a business before. The two men worked side by side on a daily basis, learning how to run a business together in real time. It was difficult, but fulfilling in an odd way. Most of the work was menial, sweeping floors, restocking shelves, unloading delivery trucks, but some of it was more interesting, like managing the inventory system or building relationships with suppliers. Brett poured himself into the business, learning all he could and doing his best to fill the May-sized void that now consumed his life. Preston had a business partner who was funding the entire operation from afar. The two had a vision on creating a chain of small, sustainable markets where they could offer fresh food to small towns in Texas at reasonable prices. As a part of that business proposition, they would often order batches of meat, fish, and produce that were much smaller than a typical grocery store, meaning the shipments were more expensive. WellsCo kept the prices down to fit the other part of the business vision. So, if they weren't able to sell every bit of fresh food in the place each week, they would end on a slight loss. The community support was there for the most part. St. Farrians loved to grill and throw parties with their neighbors, so the meats and veggies would usually be picked over before the end of business on Saturday. The losses were minimal, and the investor allowed the store to continue operating. Although Preston and Brett worked closely together on almost every aspect of the business, Preston tried to shield his one employee from the realities of their funding. No recent high school graduate should need to carry the anxiety of potentially losing their job over a poorly written business plan. The Harvey tomato incident forced Preston to make Brett confront the realities of small business earlier than he had hoped. Harvey had always ordered a few hundred tomatoes on Sunday, and WellsCo could get the shipment on Monday. Harvey would use the tomatoes to make BLTs for the old-timers and anyone else who had a hankering for the great sandwich. Harvey loved it because he would slice and prep most of the ingredients ahead of time. WellsCo loved it because there was a large order that they could count on every week to help them balance the books. One week, Preston had placed the tomato order as usual, only to find out Harvey didn't need tomatoes that week. In fact, he didn't need any ingredients. He was going to be out of town for a couple weeks to visit his sister and closing the cafe while he was gone. For 2 whole weeks, the old-timers were going to need to find another space to waste their time. That didn't stop the tomatoes from arriving. Preston did his best to negotiate with the supplier to cancel the order and take them back, but all deliveries are final, and the invoice put WellsCo in the red further than any other week in its short history. The Harvey tomato incident was completely Preston's fault. He owned up to that and took responsibility. Unfortunately, it didn't matter who held the blame. The incident highlighted just how risky the business plan was, and the money stopped coming. Faced with the reality that WellsCo could only operate on the money it brought in, no safety net, Preston broke the news to Brett that he would need to find another job. What do you mean? Well, that tomato order really screwed us. Just looking at the books, I don't see any way we can stay open. We can do it, Preston. We just need to rework the business, make a few changes. We can find a way. Brett tried to give Preston a prep talk. This was not only his livelihood, this was the only thing in his life that he could be proud of. Sorry, man, I don't see it. Brett was desperate to stay at WellsCo. There was only one solution he could see to the issue. I'll buy the store. He couldn't believe what had just come out of his mouth. He stood at the counter just as shocked as Preston. He didn't know why he had said that, but he didn't want to take it back either. Brett needed WellsCo. With what money, Brett? I know what we pay you. We'll work it out. Please, Preston. Preston, Brett, and the investor worked together over the next couple days to come up with an agreed price and method of payment. He went to St. Farr Credit Union and secured a small business loan, and before he knew it, Brett had gone from a low-paid grocery store employee to the owner of the place. Preston handed him the keys, wished him luck, and left town. Now Brett had something new to focus on, something new to build. He wasn't sure how he was going to do it, but he had to make WellsCo a success. If he couldn't, he would need to skip town and just hope St. Farr Credit Union wasn't able to find him.